When I first met Ryan, I thought I'd finally met someone who truly saw me. Not just another face in the crowd. Not another content creator trying to ride trends for clicks. But someone who actually looked past the camera lens and saw the person behind it. At that time, I was still small. Barely 5,000 followers on my channel. I wasn't famous. I wasn't flashy. I made videos about real things. Heartbreak, loneliness, mental health. The quiet moments of life that people tend to hide. My content wasn't perfect, but it was honest. I spoke from my heart, even when my voice trembled. Ryan, though, he was different. He already had an audience, 20 times larger than mine. He was charming, confident, funny. The kind of person who made people listen when he spoke. His edits were sharp, his thumbnails eye-catching, his laugh contagious. I had admired his work from a distance for months. I never thought he would even notice me. But one day, he did. It started with a comment on one of my videos. He wrote, "Your content feels so real, Mia. You have something rare." I remember staring at that comment, reading it over and over. Coming from him, it meant everything. I felt seen for the first time. Not by a fan, not by a stranger online, but by someone I respected. The next day, he sent me a message. "Hey, your energy's amazing. We should collaborate sometime." My heart skipped a beat. A collaboration with Ryan could change everything for me. But more than that, I was excited to meet someone who seemed to share the same creative fire. We met a week later at a small cafe downtown to discuss ideas. He was late, of course, but when he walked in, it felt like the whole place shifted toward him. He had that kind of presence, the effortless charm that made you forgive him before he even apologized. He smiled, shook my hand, and said, "You have something special, Mia. You're real. Not like those fake influencers who chase trends." Those words sank deep. I'd been told before that my content was too emotional or too raw, but Ryan called it real. It felt like validation I didn't even know I needed. Our first collaboration was simple, a day in the life vlog, where we filmed our creative process, coffee runs, behind-the-scenes bloopers. The chemistry was undeniable. It didn't feel like acting. We laughed naturally, teased each other, and shared genuine conversations. When we posted the video, the response was explosive. His fans flooded my channel with comments. "OMG, you two are perfect together. You both give real couple vibes." Collab of the year. My subscriber count doubled overnight. Ryan texted me after the upload. "Told you we'd make magic." I believed him. We started filming more together. Weekly vlogs, challenges, even live streams. The energy between us felt electric. He'd joke, I'd roll my eyes, and the audience would go wild. It was easy to forget the camera was even there. Ryan had a way of making me feel like we were a team, like we were building something bigger than ourselves. Late at night, after editing, he'd call me just to brainstorm. "We're gonna take over this platform, Mia, you and me." I used to smile at those words. Lying in bed, imagining our channels growing side by side, imagining us succeeding together. But then small things started to change. Subtle things. Things I brushed off at first. When we'd shoot together, he always wanted the camera angled to favor him. "Lighting looks better on my side," he'd say. I didn't argue. I thought, fine, it's just lighting. When I'd suggest a video idea, he'd laugh softly and say, "That's cute, but it might not get views." He'd replace my idea with something trendier, flashier, louder. I'd smile anyway and go along with it. After all, he knew more about this world than I did, right? Then I noticed he never tagged me in our videos. My name would be in the title sometimes, but never in the description, never in his captions. When I mentioned it once, he said, "Oh, I just forgot. Don't worry, my fans already know who you are." I let it slide because I wanted to believe he cared. I told myself he was just busy, but busy people don't forget names. They just choose where to place them. As his numbers climbed, I began to feel like I was fading in the background of my own life. In every comment section, people said things like, "Ryan's carrying these videos." Mia's lucky to be part of his content. Those words stung, but I pretended not to care. I told myself it didn't matter who got credit, as long as we were growing together. I'd tell him sometimes, "Our audience loves us," and he'd correct me softly, "My audience loves us." That single word, "my," echoed longer than he probably meant it to. Still, I stayed, because when you care about someone, you don't walk away at the first red flag. You convince yourself it's just part of the process. You tell yourself it's love, or partnership, or destiny. I didn't see what was really happening, that Ryan wasn't building something with me. He was building something on top of me. I was the foundation he was standing on. Invisible but necessary. Useful but replaceable. And yet, every time I doubted him, he'd say something that pulled me back in. "You're my lucky charm," he'd whisper during shoots. "Couldn't do this without you." Those moments were enough to silence the voice in my head that screamed something was off. I didn't realize then that his words were just part of the performance. Lines from a script he'd been perfecting, long before I walked into his story. If I had looked closer, maybe I would have seen it. The way he calculated every move, every smile, every public post. The way he framed our relationship not as a bond, but as content. But I didn't look. I was too busy believing in the version of him I had created in my mind. The kind, supportive, ambitious man who believed in me. I thought he was the storm I could dance through. I didn't know he was the storm that would tear everything apart. At that time, I was living inside his narrative without realizing it. I wasn't the main character. I wasn't even the love interest. I was just the stepping stone, the girl who made him look more relatable, more human, more grounded, the one who gave his audience something to adore while he built his empire. And the worst part is, I let him, because when you trust someone completely, you don't see the betrayal being written between the lines. I didn't know it yet, but my story with Ryan was never about love or partnership. It was about power, attention, and control. He wasn't just using the camera to capture moments. He was using it to capture me, and I was too blinded by his light to notice the shadows he was hiding behind. Ryan started featuring me in his videos more often, and with each upload, it felt like we were becoming inseparable. The more time we spent filming together, the more I began to believe this was something real, something special. One evening, while we were reviewing clips at his apartment, Ryan leaned back in his chair, looked at me with that confident grin, and said, "Let's make this official, Mia. You and me, the internet's next favorite duo." The way he said it made my heart skip a beat. It sounded like a promise, like a dream finally coming true. I smiled, pretending to play it cool, but inside I was over the moon. I thought we were on the verge of something big, something that could change both our lives. We began filming constantly. Mornings started with coffee and camera setups. We recorded everything: morning routines, date vlogs, cooking challenges, even silly pranks that we'd laugh about later while editing. The chemistry looked effortless on camera. Every time we hit record, it was like the rest of the world disappeared. I loved how natural it felt to be beside him. Laughing, teasing, creating. Our audiences could feel it too. The comments were filled with people saying things like, "You two are perfect together," and "You both deserve all the success coming your way." I believed them. I believed in us. Ryan had this drive, this hunger for perfection that I admired. He always wanted to reshoot scenes until they were flawless. "Smile more, Mia," he'd say during takes. "Let's redo that. Your energy felt off." At first I didn't mind. I thought it was just him being professional. He wanted our content to stand out, and I respected that. I told myself that perfection took work, and if he pushed me harder, it was only because he believed in me. But as days turned into weeks, the pressure started to build. He began correcting everything. My expressions, my tone, even the way I sat. Tilt your head a bit. That looks better on camera. Or, don't laugh too much. It ruins the vibe. I convinced myself it was normal. I told myself, he's just passionate. When our views started skyrocketing, brands began noticing us. Emails flooded in, sponsorship offers, partnership deals, invitations to events. It felt surreal, like everything we dreamed of was finally happening. But I quickly noticed something strange. Every email, every brand message was addressed to him. Even the deals that featured me in the videos were under his name. When I mentioned it once, half jokingly, he laughed and said, "Don't worry, Mia, we're a team. What's mine is yours." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that behind the I, in every sentence, there was still an invisible we. The money started rolling in. Ryan began upgrading his life. A new camera, a new studio, a bigger apartment. He called it investment. I called it progress. But deep down, I noticed how different things were. I was still filming on the same camera, still editing on my old laptop, still waiting for the day he'd say, "Let's split things evenly." That day never came. Still, I tried to hold on. I told myself success doesn't always happen equally, that maybe my turn would come later. Ryan's charm was disarming. He always knew the right thing to say at the right time. Whenever I felt left out, he'd grab my hand, look me in the eyes, and say, "You're my lucky charm, Mia. I couldn't do this without you." Those words always pulled me back in. They were like a bandage over a wound that kept reopening. But soon, the cracks became impossible to ignore. Every time Ryan posted our videos, he'd tag brands, locations, hashtags, everything except me. My name was nowhere in his captions. My channel wasn't linked. My credit disappeared as quietly as my voice during our shoots. I brushed it off the first few times. I thought maybe he just forgot. But forgetting became a pattern, and patterns reveal truths we don't want to see. The comments began to change too. The ones that once said, "You two are perfect together," slowly turned into, "Ryan's carrying these videos," or "Mia's just lucky to be there." Each word cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I'd scroll through the comments section late at night, pretending to laugh it off, pretending it didn't matter. But deep down it did. I had worked so hard to build something real, something that reflected my heart, and now I was being written out of my own story. Ryan didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did and didn't care. His focus was always on the next video, the next trend, the next number milestone. When I brought up how the comments made me feel, he smiled and said, "Don't take it so seriously. It's just the internet." But I was taking it seriously. This wasn't just content to me. It was my life, my passion, my identity. I was losing pieces of myself while helping him build his empire. Our dynamics started to shift. Filming felt more like work than fun. Ryan became obsessed with analytics, constantly checking view counts and engagement rates. "We need to post more often," he'd say. "You need to show more energy, Mia. People love bubbly personalities." I felt like I was performing a version of myself that wasn't real. Every smile, every laugh, every glance at him started to feel scripted. Meanwhile, he was thriving. His numbers were exploding. His DMs were full of collaborations, event invites, and fans telling him how inspiring he was. He started attending influencer parties, red carpet events, meet and greets, always alone. When I asked why he never took me along, he'd say, "Those things are boring. Trust me. I'm just networking." Then he'd come home and tell stories about who he met, who complimented him, who wanted to work with him next. I'd nod and smile, even as a quiet ache formed in my chest. There were nights when I'd look at our old videos, the ones where we laughed without pretending, where his eyes still softened when he looked at me. I missed that version of us. I missed me, somewhere between his rise and my silence. I'd stopped being a person and had become content. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was his backdrop, the element that made his story look more appealing. It felt like love at first, real, passionate, unstoppable love. But now it felt like a contract I never signed. I started realizing that Ryan wasn't building a dream with me. He was building one around me, leaving no space for my name in the credits. He was the star. I was the supporting act, useful, replaceable, forgotten once the applause faded. And as his empire grew taller, I felt smaller every day, standing in the shadow of something I had helped create, but would never truly be part of. The more popular Ryan became, the more he began to drift away, almost like fame had built a glass wall between us. I could still see him, still reach for him, but he wasn't really there anymore. His schedule became unpredictable, late to shoots, distracted during planning, always glued to his phone. The calls that used to end with laughter now went unanswered. When I'd ask if everything was okay, he'd sigh and say, "Mia, you worry too much. I'm just busy." But I knew something had shifted. The warmth that once made me feel safe had turned into something cold and unfamiliar. I tried to keep things normal. I'd spend hours brainstorming new video ideas, pouring my heart into concepts that could bring back the spark we used to have. I'd suggest them gently, hoping to start a conversation like we used to. But now, every time I opened my mouth, Ryan shut me down with that same dismissive tone. "Babe, let me handle the creative stuff. You just be yourself. That's your strength." I smiled on the outside, but inside, it felt like a slap. The translation was clear. Stay quiet. Let me shine. He wasn't even pretending to hide it anymore. Our relationship had become something that only existed on camera. Behind the scenes, silence filled the spaces where laughter used to live. I'd watch him scrolling through his analytics, obsessed with numbers and engagement. His reflection in the screen seemed more real to him than I was. I missed the man who once looked at me like I mattered, but now I was just another frame in his highlight reel, a background to his growing fame. Then came the day that changed everything. It started like any other filming day. Ryan was in an unusually good mood, smiling wider than usual, moving faster, buzzing with a kind of energy that made me nervous. "We're going to film something big today," he said, grinning. "Something the audience will never forget." I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was another challenge video, or maybe a surprise announcement. I set up the camera, like always, unaware that I was setting up the stage for my own humiliation. We sat down together on the couch. He turned on the camera, took a deep breath, and then looked at me with that same serious expression he used when talking about important topics. "Mia," he said, his voice soft but steady, "I've been thinking, maybe we're not right for each other anymore." My heart froze. I blinked, confused, waiting for him to laugh or say he was joking, but he didn't. His expression stayed blank, almost bored. "What?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What are you talking about?" He kept going, calmly listing reasons I couldn't even process. "We've grown apart. Our content feels forced. It's not working anymore." I could feel my chest tightening, my throat closing up. The words didn't make sense. Everything we'd built together, every moment, every promise, suddenly felt like it was crumbling right in front of me. I tried to speak, to ask him why, but tears started spilling before I could even form words. I thought maybe the camera was off. I thought this was a private moment, a real breakup, but it wasn't. The camera was rolling the entire time, capturing everything. My tears, my confusion, my pain. When I finally stood up and walked out of frame, Ryan looked straight into the lens, smirked, and said, "Got her." I didn't see that part until later. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications. My heart skipped when I saw Ryan's new upload. Breakup prank on my girlfriend. She didn't see it coming. My fingers went cold. I opened it, praying it wasn't what I thought it was. But it was. My entire heartbreak. My tears. My shock. My voice cracking as I begged for clarity was plastered across the internet for millions to see. The comments were brutal. LOL. She looks so dumb. Ryan really played her. This is the best prank ever. 5 million views in just 1 week. People laughed at my pain, like it was a punchline. I sat there in silence, watching strangers mock something that had shattered me. Every word, every emoji, every felt like a knife. I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. When I confronted Ryan, I could barely hold myself together. "You recorded me crying," I said quietly, my voice shaking. "You made a joke out of me." He didn't even look guilty. He shrugged, his eyes fixed on his phone. "Relax, Mia. It's just content. Don't take it personally. People loved it. It's blowing up." I stared at him, waiting for him to realize how cruel that sounded, waiting for some sign of remorse. But there was nothing. Just that blank, detached face that cared more about numbers than people. That's when I finally saw him for who he truly was. Not a creator, not a partner, but a manipulator who'd do anything for attention. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the video again and again, studying every frame. There was no hint of hesitation in his eyes. No guilt, no pause before smiling at the camera. He knew exactly what he was doing. And worse, he enjoyed it. The comments praising him, the sponsors reaching out, the follower count exploding. He saw it all as proof that he'd made the right move. And that's when something inside me broke. Or maybe it didn't break. It woke up. I realized I had spent months shrinking myself to fit into his world. I had given up credit, control, and confidence, just to keep him happy. But now there was nothing left to lose. He had already taken everything. My trust, my dignity, my image. And if fame was what he worshipped, then fame would be the very thing that destroyed him. I stopped crying. I stopped begging. I started planning. I would let the same light he craved so desperately expose every shadow he tried to hide. I would show the world that behind the perfect smile and curated charm was a man who would burn anyone's dignity for clout. He wanted fame. I'd make sure it became his downfall. After that prank video, Ryan's life changed overnight. His channel exploded, his numbers skyrocketed, and his ego grew even faster. Within weeks, he was being called one of the fastest rising influencers of the year. Sponsors that used to ignore his emails were now offering him deals worth thousands. He started appearing in podcasts, magazine interviews, even brand campaigns. I'd scroll through my feed and see his face everywhere. Smiling, confident, polished. It was like the world had crowned him a star. And me? I had been written out of the story entirely. Everywhere I looked, it was his name, his success, his story. And every time fans asked, "Where's Mia?" he brushed it off with that smug grin that used to charm me, but now made my stomach turn. "Oh, she couldn't handle the spotlight," he'd say casually, as if I was some fragile, weak thing that cracked under pressure. Those words hit harder than any insult. I'd been there through every late night, every technical failure, every breakdown when he doubted himself. I was the one who edited his videos, refined his scripts, crafted his thumbnails, gave feedback when he panicked about engagement, and now, the same man who used to thank me for keeping him grounded was painting me as someone who couldn't keep up. It felt like betrayal, layered over betrayal, not just personal, but professional. I had helped him build everything, And now he was standing at the top, pretending he did it all alone. I tried to stay calm, to convince myself it wasn't worth reacting to. Maybe if I stayed quiet, he'd come to his senses. Maybe he'd realize what he was doing. But deep down, I already knew he wouldn't. The internet moved on quickly. People forgot about me. I stopped uploading for a while because I couldn't bring myself to face the camera. Every time I hit record, I saw flashes of that prank. My face streaked with tears. The cruel smile on his face when he said, "Got her." The humiliation replayed in my mind, like a loop I couldn't escape. I'd scroll through my own comment sections and see pity mixed with mockery. Poor girl. Guess she wasn't cut out for it. Ryan really leveled up after leaving her. It didn't matter how much I had done for him. In the eyes of the internet, I was just the ex who couldn't handle the game. Weeks turned into months, and I kept my distance from everything connected to him. But one night, while mindlessly scrolling through social media, I saw something that made my chest tighten. Ryan was live. The thumbnail showed him laughing with someone. I clicked out of habit, curiosity outweighing caution. And that's when I saw her, Aria. She was beautiful, confident, and already popular in her own right. I'd seen her before, briefly in the same circles. Now she was sitting next to Ryan, their bodies close, their smiles perfectly aligned. They looked rehearsed, like they had been planning this image for a while. Ryan was glowing, that kind of glow people get when they know they're winning. "Finally," he said during the stream. "Someone who really understands me." The words hit me like a punch. He said them so effortlessly, like they meant nothing. The chat exploded with the reactions. "OMG, they're so cute." "New couple alert." Aria and Ryan are the real deal. I sat there staring at the comments, each one twisting the knife deeper. The same fans who once called me the perfect match were now shipping him with someone else. My name popped up too, but not kindly. Didn't he prank his ex? Guess she wasn't the one after all. LOL, he upgraded. My throat tightened. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them laugh together, pretending I never existed. He had replaced me completely. Not just as a girlfriend, but as a collaborator, as a creator, as part of his brand. And worse, he was thriving because of it. He had turned my pain into profit, my silence into his success story. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at my blank laptop screen. My mind replayed every memory. The nights we stayed up editing together. The first sponsorship we celebrated. The moments I thought we were building something meaningful. Every piece of his current success had traces of me in it. My ideas, my editing style, even some of the phrases he used in his captions. All of it came from me. I had helped him design his brand, refine his tone, even choose the name of his channel. And now he was using everything we built together with someone else, acting like it had all been his vision from the start. The fury that burned through me wasn't just anger, it was awakening. I had spent months letting him shape the story, control the narrative, decide how the world saw me. But watching that live stream made something inside me snap. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was erasure. I realized I hadn't just been replaced. I had been deleted. I closed my laptop and sat there in silence, my mind spinning. For so long, I had felt powerless, humiliated, broken. But in that moment, a strange calm settled over me. The heartbreak was still there, yes, but beneath it was something sharper, colder, a purpose. I had tried to protect him, defend him, believe in him, but he had used that trust as a weapon against me. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. If he wanted fame so badly, he could keep it. But I was going to make sure everyone saw the cost. The same spotlight that made him shine would be the one that exposed every lie, every manipulation, every mask he hid behind. I didn't know how yet, but I knew it was coming. I wasn't the girl he humiliated on camera anymore. I wasn't the ex he mocked in interviews. I wasn't the weak one who couldn't handle the spotlight. I was the storm he didn't see coming. And this time, I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I kept my calm, even when every part of me wanted to scream. I knew if I reacted out of anger, I'd look like the jealous ex, the bitter one who couldn't move on. That's exactly what Ryan would want. He'd twist the story again and make himself the victim. So, I played a different game, one he'd never expect. I went completely silent. No posts, no comments, no replies, nothing. Just a clean, cold silence that echoed louder than any public fight ever could. And while he basked in the glow of his new fame, I quietly disappeared, but only from his world, not from the battlefield. I began watching him closely. Every upload, every live stream, every interview. I studied it all like a detective piecing together a crime. I started noticing patterns. Ryan's entire brand revolved around being the good guy of the internet. The one who'd been hurt, the one who'd kept it real when everyone else was fake. He told stories about heartbreak, struggle, and resilience, carefully crafted to pull empathy out of people. He knew how to perform vulnerability without ever truly being vulnerable. It was a role he'd perfected long before I met him, but something had shifted. His energy wasn't the same. His smiles looked rehearsed now. His once spontaneous jokes felt forced. I realized that the moment I left, he lost a piece of authenticity he'd been leeching from me all along. Without realizing it, I had been the heart of his content, the realism behind his performance, and he couldn't replicate that. That's when I understood my real weapon wasn't revenge. It was truth, real emotion, real storytelling, something he couldn't fake, no matter how many cameras he pointed at himself. I just had to find a way to use it, not against him, but for myself. So I started again, quietly, no big announcement, no pity post. I just turned on the camera and began talking about life, pain, trust, and the masks people wear. I didn't say names. I didn't have to. Anyone who'd followed us before could connect the dots. My tone was calm, my voice steady, but underneath it, there was truth. Raw, unfiltered truth. I talked about how people mistake attention for love, how some chase fame so hard they forget their humanity. At first, the response was small. A few thousand views here, a few kind comments there. But I didn't stop. I uploaded again and again. Every story I told came from a real place, my place. Slowly, people began to notice. They could feel something real in my words. Something missing from the polished perfection of Ryan's world. Then it happened. One of my videos went viral. It wasn't flashy, no dramatic editing or clickbait title. Just me, sitting in soft light, telling a story about a girl who helped someone build their dream, only to be erased once success came. I remember saying, sometimes people will climb the ladder you helped them build, and then pretend they don't remember your name. That one line hit like a lightning strike. The comments poured in. This sounds familiar. Wait, is she talking about Ryan? Oh my God, I remember her. From that prank video. And then, she deserves better. She was the real one. That's when I realized silence had worked. My calm had turned into curiosity, and that curiosity was turning into truth. People started rewatching Ryan's old videos, picking apart his fake laughs and scripted emotions. Threads appeared on Reddit. Fans began questioning him. Why did he treat her like that? Was that prank even real? The internet that once mocked me was now defending me, but I didn't feed it. I didn't respond or confirm anything. I stayed in my lane, kept creating, kept letting the story unfold naturally. The less I said, the louder the truth became. Every new upload of mine felt like another small tremor, shaking the foundation of his fake empire. His engagement started slipping. The comment sections under his videos weren't filled with praise anymore. They were filled with doubt. People started saying things like, This feels off now, and he's trying too hard. That's when I saw fear in his eyes during one of his live streams. That fake confidence, that easy charm, it was fading. The audience he once owned was slipping away, one truth at a time, and I didn't have to lift a finger against him. All I did was tell my story. And people connected with it because it wasn't a performance. It was pain transformed into purpose. Behind the scenes, I planned my next steps carefully. I didn't want to be known as the girl Ryan betrayed. I wanted to be known as me, the creator who turned heartbreak into a movement. I reached out to other small creators, real ones who valued honesty over perfection. We collaborated, shared raw stories, built a small but loyal community. I didn't chase fame this time. I chased impact, and it worked. My channel started growing faster than ever. Brands that once ignored me started reaching out. Interviews, podcast invites. Suddenly, everyone wanted to hear my side. But I still didn't name him. I didn't have to. Every win I got made him smaller in the eyes of the audience. Every time I smiled genuinely on camera, people saw the difference between his act and my truth. The sweetest part, he couldn't even publicly respond without exposing himself. He was trapped, cornered by his own image. If he admitted the connection, he'd look guilty. If he denied it, people would call him a liar. So he stayed silent, and I kept rising. Revenge, I learned, doesn't always come with shouting or chaos. Sometimes it's quiet, strategic, patient. Sometimes it's the slow, steady reclaiming of your own story. And as I watched my community grow, people who actually saw me for who I was, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew this was only the beginning. The storm hadn't hit yet, but it was forming. And when it did, it wouldn't be loud or messy. It would be poetic. Because Ryan had built his fame on a lie, and I was slowly turning that lie inside out. One story, one truth, one silent plan at a time. The video wasn't meant to destroy him. It was meant to heal me. But sometimes, the truth has a way of doing both. When I uploaded, he pretended to love me for views. I didn't expect what came next. The story was raw, emotional, stripped of every filter. I remember recording it late at night, sitting by my window with city lights reflecting off the glass. My voice trembled in parts, but I didn't stop. It wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty. I hit upload, closed my laptop, and went to bed. By morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications poured in like a flood I couldn't control. 10,000 views became 100,000, then 1 million. Within a week, $10 million. People connected with it in a way I never imagined. They shared it, reacted to it, and talked about it on forums and podcasts. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement. People started tagging their own experiences, saying things like, "This is exactly what happened to me," or, "She's telling the truth we've all been scared to say." My voice had become theirs, and my pain had turned into a mirror for everyone who'd ever been used and discarded. But while I found strength, Ryan began to unravel. He couldn't stand being the villain in a story he didn't control. I saw his first reaction post a few days later. A shaky attempt at damage control. The thumbnail showed him looking sad, hand on his chest, and the title read, "The Truth About the Rumors." He didn't mention my name, but the world didn't need it. His tone was defensive, his charm forced. He said things like, "People are twisting my story," and "You don't know what really happened." But what he didn't realize was that the more he spoke, the more he exposed himself. The internet did what it always does best. It started digging. Fans rewatched old clips. Screenshots resurfaced. Timelines were compared. Everything he said contradicted what was already public. The stories matched mine too closely for coincidence. Every time he tried to deny something, there was a clip or a post proving the opposite. Watching it all unfold was surreal. I didn't have to lift a finger. The truth was doing all the work for me. His loyal fans tried to defend him at first, claiming people were overreacting. But slowly, even they began to doubt him. Why does this sound rehearsed? Didn't he say something different last year? Why did he delete that old vlog? The shift was visible. The same audience that had laughed when I cried during that prank video now saw through the act. They finally realized how deeply he had played everyone. Not just me, but them too. I stayed silent. That was my strategy. I didn't respond to his videos or his subtweets. I didn't take interviews. I just kept creating my own content. Authentic, emotional, reflective. Each story I told carried traces of truth that people could feel. My silence became louder than any argument. The less I said, the more powerful my presence became. It drove him crazy. Then came the breaking point. A massive brand he'd been working with announced they were re-evaluating partnerships. Within days, another sponsorship dropped him. He tried to laugh it off publicly, pretending it was no big deal. But his frustration showed through every post. He started ranting about cancel culture, acting like a victim. But no one was buying it anymore. The sympathy he used to command had vanished. Behind the scenes, people whispered about his behavior, how he treated collaborators, how he'd taken credit for others' work. The truth that had been buried under his fame was finally crawling out, piece by piece. I didn't celebrate it, but I did feel a quiet sense of justice, because this wasn't revenge born of rage. It was balance being restored. One night, curiosity got the better of me, and I visited his channel. His latest video had barely a fraction of the views he used to get. The comments section was filled with disappointment and betrayal. You let fame change you. You played too many people. I used to look up to you. The man who once thrived on validation was now suffocating under it. I watched him in that video. Eyes tired, smile forced. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity, because I realized he wasn't just losing fame. He was losing himself. When you build your entire identity on lies, there's nothing left when they fall apart. And they always do. He deleted old videos, turned off comments, and tried to disappear. But it was too late. The internet never forgets. His silence now wasn't strategic like mine. It was desperate. Meanwhile, my channel soared. I was invited to speak on podcasts about resilience, truth, and healing. People called me authentic, relatable, real. I didn't chase fame this time. It found me naturally. Each video I made wasn't about him anymore. It was about growth, strength, and moving forward. The more I shared, the more people healed alongside me. It was no longer just my story. It belonged to everyone who had ever been silenced by someone louder, richer, or more powerful. The irony was undeniable. The fame he used me to build was now the very thing destroying him. The fans who once adored him had turned away, and the ones who once doubted me now stood firmly behind me. The balance had shifted completely. I didn't gloat. I didn't post cryptic messages. I didn't need to. The truth had already spoken, louder than any revenge ever could. One evening, as I sat editing a new video, I thought back to where it all began. Those early collaborations, those fake smiles, that naive belief that we were a team. It all felt like another lifetime. I wasn't the same girl anymore. The pain had shaped me, sharpened me, and strangely enough, set me free. Justice didn't come with fireworks or dramatic confrontations. It came quietly, through patience, through truth, through time. Watching everything unfold, I realized something important. Real revenge isn't about destruction. It's about evolution. It's about becoming everything they said you couldn't be, while they crumble under the weight of their own lies. So when I saw his subscriber count drop again, another 1,000 gone, I just smiled softly to myself, not out of spite, but out of closure. Because finally, after everything he did, The universe had done what I never could. It turned his fame into his downfall, and turned my silence into my strength. And in that moment, I knew the truth had finally risen. Unstoppable, undeniable, and free. The message came late one night, when the world was quiet, and I was alone with my thoughts. My phone buzzed on the bedside table, and for a second, I considered ignoring it like I had for weeks. But when I saw his name, Ryan, something inside me froze. My chest tightened, my breath hitched, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't know whether to laugh or throw the phone across the room. The man who had humiliated me in front of millions, who had erased me from his story as if I never existed, was now reaching out with a simple, pathetic line. "Mia, can we talk?" I stared at it for minutes. My mind flooded with every memory. Every fake smile, every lie disguised as love, every time he'd told me I wasn't enough. The old me would have replied instantly, desperate to fix things, to make sense of the pain. But that version of me was gone. I had buried her the moment I stopped letting his silence define my worth. So I didn't answer. I just watched the screen light up again and again as his calls came through. I let him wait. I let him feel what it was like to be ignored. But eventually, my curiosity betrayed me. I picked up. His voice was shaky. Nothing like the confident tone he used on camera. "Mia, you've ruined me," he said, his words breaking. I could almost hear the panic under his breath. Not regret, not sorrow, just fear. Fear of losing everything he had built off lies. "You've ruined me." He said it again, like he was trying to make me responsible for his downfall. I felt something heavy rise inside me. But it wasn't guilt, it was clarity. "No, Ryan," I said quietly, my voice calm but sharp. "You ruined yourself. I just told my story." He went silent. The same man who once talked over me, who always had a way to twist my emotions, had nothing to say. Then he tried to spin it again. The same tired trick. "You didn't have to go this far. You've taken it too seriously. It's just the internet, Mia. It's not that deep." I almost laughed at how predictable he sounded. That's what abusers do when the mirror finally shows their reflection. They call it distortion. I didn't let him finish. "You use people's pain to get clicks," I said. "You made love look like content. You made me a prop in your story. Now you're facing the consequences you've been running from." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I spoke like someone who had finally stopped needing his validation. And when I hung up, I didn't feel revenge. I felt relief. Quiet, steady relief. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It healed. That was the last time we spoke. The next few days, the internet erupted. But this time, I wasn't the one fueling the fire. The truth was, a major YouTube commentary channel dropped a 40-minute expose titled "The Fall of Ryan, When Authenticity is a Lie." It spread like wildfire. I watched the video from start to finish, my heart pounding as they broke down his entire online persona. Every fake apology, every manipulative statement, every lie he had fed to his followers, all laid bare. They showed clips of him mocking emotional creators, screenshots of messages where he bragged about using heartbreak as clickbait. It was brutal, honest, and painfully deserved. The reaction was explosive. People who once idolized him began to turn. The same fans who used to comment, "King Ryan forever," now flooded his posts with questions. "Did you really do that to Mia? Is this who you really are?" He tried to do damage control, posting vague statements, blaming cancel culture, and saying he was misunderstood. But no one was buying it. He turned off comments. He deleted old videos. Then suddenly, he disappeared. No posts, no stories, no updates, just silence. And that silence was poetic. The man who once couldn't go a day without broadcasting his life had vanished from his own audience. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I didn't even mention it online. I didn't have to. The truth had already done what revenge never could. At night, I'd scroll through my own comments. Thousands of people, not talking about him anymore, but about healing, about recognizing manipulation, about leaving toxic relationships. You helped me see my worth. One comment said, "Thank you for showing us what strength looks like." Reading those words, I realized something. My story was no longer about Ryan. It was about reclaiming the voice he tried to silence. I had turned pain into purpose, and that was the most powerful revenge of all. I started sleeping better, eating again, creating again. The same camera that once captured my tears now recorded my strength. My videos weren't about him. They were about truth, about growth, about the quiet kind of victory that doesn't need applause. Every time I pressed upload, I wasn't seeking validation. I was documenting freedom. Sometimes I'd wonder what he was doing, where he had gone. Maybe hiding, maybe reinventing himself under another name. But I never searched. I didn't need to. His absence was proof enough that I'd won. Not through revenge, but through peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from watching someone fall, but from realizing you no longer care if they do. The night I knew it was truly over, I stood on my balcony, looking at the city lights flickering like distant stars. The air was cool, soft against my skin, and for the first time, I felt light. Like the weight of his betrayal had finally lifted. I thought about everything that had happened, and a small genuine smile crept across my face. Not a smile of victory, but of release. Sometimes revenge doesn't roar. It doesn't need fire or fury. Sometimes it's quiet, the sound of truth echoing longer than lies ever could. That's what this was. He tried to turn me into a footnote in his story, but in the end, I became the author of my own. And as I watched the night fade into morning, I realized something simple, yet powerful. The best revenge is peace. And I finally had mine. Months passed, like a slow healing tide, washing over old wounds. The chaos that once filled my days had faded into something quieter, gentler. My channel had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. Millions of followers, endless support, countless messages from people who saw themselves in my story. But it no longer felt like a platform for revenge. It had become a space for healing. Somewhere along the way, I stopped chasing closure and started embracing peace. I no longer checked his page or searched for updates about his life. The need to prove myself, to show the world who was right, had dissolved into something simpler. Contentment each morning began with calm. I'd wake up to the soft glow of sunlight slipping through my curtains, brew my coffee, and sit by the window with my journal. Instead of scripting dramatic narrations or exposing lies, I wrote about strength, forgiveness, and self-worth. I wanted my voice to become a refuge for others, the kind of voice I once needed but didn't have. My new videos reflected that. They weren't about betrayal or pain anymore. They were about rebuilding, moving forward, and reclaiming happiness after heartbreak. And surprisingly, they resonated even more deeply than the revenge stories ever had. People didn't just watch. They connected. Every day, messages poured in from viewers around the world. "Your story gave me the courage to walk away," one wrote. Another said, "I learned to recognize fake love because of you." Some told me they had left toxic partners. Others said they had started their own healing journeys. Reading those words, I felt something shift inside me. This was what I had always wanted. To make a difference. To turn my pain into purpose. The numbers, the fame, the sponsorships. None of that compared to the feeling of helping someone else find the light after their own darkness. Then, one quiet afternoon, a message appeared in my inbox that made my heart pause. It was from Aria, the same girl who had once been everywhere with Ryan. The girl I had convinced myself to hate, then tried to forget. I stared at her name for a while, my thumb hovering over the notification. For a moment, old emotions threatened to resurface. Jealousy, hurt, resentment. But they didn't stick. I wasn't that version of myself anymore. I opened it. Her message was short, almost hesitant. "I wish I'd listened to you," she wrote. "He used me too." I reread it a few times, waiting for anger or vindication to kick in. But all I felt was empathy. I knew that pain. The shock of realizing you were just a pawn in someone else's game. I could almost feel her heartbreak in those words. The quiet shame. The exhaustion of pretending you're okay. I thought about how I had once been her. Blindsided, manipulated, discarded. And just like that, all the bitterness I'd held vanished. I typed back slowly, choosing every word with care. "It's okay," I wrote. "We all learn eventually." When I hit send, I felt something unexplainable, like a weight lifting off my chest. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It meant I was finally free from the emotional chains that kept me tied to the past. For the first time, Ryan wasn't a name that hurt to think about. He was just a closed chapter, a lesson written in scars I no longer hid from. That night, I stepped onto my balcony as the sky turned gold, the air cool against my skin. The city lights shimmered below, and for once, I didn't feel small. I felt grounded, whole. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the humiliation, the revenge, and now, the peace. If someone had told me back then that this is where I'd end up, calm, content, proud, I would have laughed. But healing sneaks up on you quietly. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or fireworks. One day, you just notice the ache is gone. As the weeks went by, I started dreaming again. Not about Ryan, not about getting even, but about what I wanted to create next. I began writing scripts about self-growth, second chances, new beginnings. My videos shifted from pain to purpose. They weren't filled with tears or anger. They were filled with hope. And the audience noticed. The comments section became a space of love and encouragement. People shared their own stories of resilience, of letting go, of finding beauty in the aftermath of chaos. It was no longer just my journey. It was ours. Sometimes, late at night, I'd stumble across old videos, his or mine, and feel a flicker of nostalgia. But it wasn't painful anymore. It was like looking at an old photo of someone you used to know. The memories were still there, but they didn't own me. I realized I didn't need to erase the past to move on from it. I just needed to make peace with it. One day, purely by accident, I saw that Ryan's channel had gone silent. No new uploads, no engagement, nothing. The comments under his last video were filled with disappointment, people calling him out for manipulation and lies. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply closed the tab and whispered to myself, "It's done." Because it truly was. His downfall no longer defined my rise. I had built something real from the wreckage, something honest and lasting. Now when people ask about my story, I tell them this: revenge was never the victory. Healing was. Revenge might feel powerful for a moment, but healing, real, deep healing, that lasts forever. It's the kind of strength that can't be taken or faked. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I stopped playing his game. As I sat by the window that evening, watching the sunset stretch across the horizon, I realized how far I had come. The girl who once cried in front of a camera had become a woman who could stand tall in her truth. The pain that once felt endless had turned into wisdom. The storm had passed, and in its wake, there was light, and in that soft golden light, I finally understood. Revenge isn't about destroying someone else's world. It's about rebuilding your own so beautifully that their memory no longer fits inside it. That's what I had done. I had turned betrayal into strength, heartbreak into healing, and endings into beginnings. As the sky darkened and stars began to appear, I whispered to myself with a quiet smile, "This is my new dawn." Life doesn't always give closure. wrapped in apologies or explanations. Sometimes, closure comes quietly, in the stillness after chaos, when you realize you no longer care about the people who once shattered you. That's how it was for me. There was no dramatic ending, no final confrontation, no words left hanging between Ryan and me, just distance and peace. I used to think I needed him to understand how deeply he'd hurt me, to see the damage he caused, to feel remorse. But I realized, eventually, that people like him don't understand pain unless they feel it themselves. They don't recognize loyalty until it's gone, and they don't value real love until it's too late. I had wasted too many nights wishing for him to see my worth, when all along, it was never mine to prove. The day I stopped checking his social media, stopped wondering what he was doing, stopped hoping he'd say sorry, that was the day I took my power back. It wasn't loud, it wasn't triumphant. It was just quiet acceptance. I had finally made peace with the fact that some people come into your life not to stay, but to teach. Ryan taught me that not everyone who smiles at you wants you to win. He taught me that words mean nothing without respect. And most of all, he taught me that no amount of love can change someone who benefits from your pain. That lesson hurt, but it set me free. Over time, I began to see my story, not as a tragedy, but as a transformation. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every sleepless night had shaped me into someone wiser, stronger, and more grounded. I learned how to be alone without feeling lonely, how to rebuild without seeking validation, and how to trust again. Not others, but myself. Because trusting yourself after being betrayed is the hardest kind of healing, but it's also the most powerful. It means you stop questioning your worth and start believing in your own voice again. That's what true recovery feels like. Not forgetting what happened, but remembering it without pain. As my channel grew, I began hearing from people around the world who shared their own stories. Messages flooded in from strangers saying, "Your story gave me the courage to leave," or "I thought I was alone until I heard you speak." That's when I realized that my pain had found purpose. My words weren't just healing me, they were healing others. I wasn't just telling a story anymore. I was starting a movement of truth. And that's something Ryan could never take from me. He chased fame and numbers. I built connection and meaning. And in the end, that made all the difference. Sometimes I think about how different things could have been if he'd chosen honesty instead of manipulation. But then I remind myself, if he hadn't betrayed me, I might still be stuck in the background, helping him build a lie. Instead, I built something real, something that outlasted both the pain and the person who caused it. And that's the irony of betrayal. The very thing meant to break you often becomes the foundation for your strength. There's a moment, somewhere between heartbreak and healing, where you realize you don't need closure from anyone but yourself. You stop replaying the past. You stop rewriting the what-ifs. You stop waiting for an apology that may never come. That's where freedom begins. I found that freedom in silence. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of peace. The kind where your heart finally rests after fighting for too long. Now, when I think about Ryan, there's no anger left. No sadness either. Just understanding. I see him as someone who was lost, chasing validation from screens, mistaking fame for love, and content for connection. And while I wish him no harm, I also wish never to cross paths with people like him again. Because I've learned that not every story deserves a sequel. Some are meant to end exactly where they fell apart. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that the universe has its own way of delivering justice. It doesn't always happen in public or on a grand stage. Sometimes it happens quietly, in how your life flourishes while theirs falls apart, in how your peace grows while their noise fades, in how you stop caring while they can't stop remembering. That's karma in its purest form. Not revenge, Not punishment, but balance. So if you've ever been betrayed, remember this. You don't have to fight to prove your truth. You don't have to beg to be believed. Just keep living with integrity, and life will expose everything that was fake. Your silence will become your statement. Your healing will become your justice. And your growth, that will be the revenge they never see coming. I used to think my story was about Ryan, about what he did to me, about how I got back at him. But it's not. It's about me, about reclaiming my voice, my dignity, my strength. It's about learning that revenge doesn't always mean retaliation. Sometimes, revenge is smiling when they expected you to crumble. It's finding joy again after they swore you'd never recover. It's thriving in a world they no longer belong to. In the end, I didn't need to expose him. I didn't need to ruin him. Life did that on its own. All I needed to do was rise. Quietly, steadily, and unapologetically. Because the truth doesn't need noise to be heard. It only needs time. And in time, everything falls into place. Exactly as it should.